U.S. forces have reportedly seized a ship allegedly carrying Chinese-made dual-use components to Iran amid brewing tensions in the Indo-Pacific region. Is Washington testing the waters? Is America planning to revive an old tactic to pressure Beijing's ties with its adversaries? Well, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal, the ship was several hundred miles off the coast of Sri Lanka when the U.S. operatives boarded it and confiscated the cargo before letting the vessel proceed. This is for the first time, remember, in several years that American forces have intercepted a cargo traveling from China to Iran. The operation reportedly took place in November, just weeks before U.S. forces seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, citing sanctions violations. However, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command is yet to confirm this incident. The operation, remember, comes amid American efforts to curb Iran's military buildup, including its nuclear and missile programs. This following American and Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities back in June. Washington has been reportedly tracking the shipment, which allegedly included components with applications for both civilian as well as military use. Remember, the U.S. accuses China of supplying Iran with dual-use components that could potentially support Tehran's efforts to rebuild and modernize its ballistic missile forces. Back in April, the U.S. had imposed sanctions on 6 entities and 6 individuals based in Iran and China for helping Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to procure chemical ingredients used to produce solid propellant rocket motors for ballistic missiles. China, meanwhile, has repeatedly voiced opposition to such American sanctions. Beijing has argued that such sanctions hinder normal cooperation and have no basis in international law. But remember, in recent years, the U.S. has seized several cargoes of weapons and oil belonging to Iran. In January 2024, American forces operating in West Asia seized 200 packages containing Iranian-made components that Washington said were used to produce weapons such as medium-range ballistic missiles. The U.S. says the shipment seized in the Arabian Sea off the Somalia coast was destined for Houthi militants in Yemen to fuel their attacks on Red Sea shipping. In 2023, the U.S. Navy intercepted an Iranian-flagged tanker and seized its cargo of nearly 1 million barrels of sanctioned Iranian oil bound for China. In 2020, Washington seized 4 oil tankers transporting Iranian fuel to Venezuela in what it said was the largest seizure ever at the time. Let's get more perspective on this. Joining us live from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, is Collins Chong Yu Keat. He's a foreign affairs and security strategist at the University of Malaya. Mr. Keat, thanks very much for speaking with us at WION. I want to first understand from you what you make of these reports. It's not the first time that it has happened, but do you think it's unprecedented that the U.S. has done it? No confirmation yet, but if it has, do you think this is unprecedented?
Well, Washington is testing not just norms, but also China. It's signaling that enforcement red lines remain active, even amid multiple global crises at the same time. It's also a stress test to see how far China will go in backing Iran materially, and whether Beijing will challenge U.S. practices openly, or to keep plausible deniability. So we have seen how U.S. also is gauging international reactions to this, and we have seen also how China's role is deliberately opaque. Beijing benefits from maintaining Iran as a strategic counterweight to U.S. influence, of course, to keep supply chains deniable and fragmented. But also at the same time, China also wants to avoid direct confrontation or being labeled as a proliferation and enabler. So this is a classic tactic of gray zone geopolitics. But this incident sends a three-pronged message by Washington to Iran. The message is that your procurement networks are now penetrated, and to China, this strategic ambiguity concept has its own limits, but also to allies and partners, U.S. is sending a clear message that it's still willing to act, not just want, and that this is not just about one cargo ship; it's about who sets the rules in a contested global order, and that U.S. now is willing to act, and whether others will be prepared to join the U.S. in enforcing these norms and to prevent Iran from getting the needed support system, especially from China.
And so, Mr. Keat, while you say that the United States wants to reinstate that it is the one that is calling the shots, how do you think China and Iran would respond?
Well, if these matters, is left unchecked, this is transcending beyond the Middle East alone, and you will normalize the erosion of these non-proliferation norms, and to encourage other states to exploit these dual-use loopholes. This is where Washington is willing to act fast, to prevent this precedent being also taken up by other regimes, affecting also other regions, including East Asia, including Indo-Pacific, and also future crises including Taiwan and North Korea. So this is a very important early phase for Washington to be seen as tough, especially under the Trump administration, and that despite all the measures, containing China, and this is yet another setback to Beijing, and I don't see any kind of immediate tough reactions from Beijing, seeing how also the crisis evolving in East Asia regarding Taiwan and Japan, and that this is a strong message being sent to both Iran and China, but also importantly to allies in the region that the US will be here to stay in this part of the world and that is ready to act. And of course, also is not being distracted by the crisis in East Asia and in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and that Iran still remains at the radar of Washington.
All right, Mr. Keat, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective.
Thank you.